In the previous video, we saw how friendship turned into a bloody war. East Coast versus West Coast, Bad Boy versus Death Row, Tupac versus Biggie, the best-selling tragedy in the history of music. But while the headlines were burning and the two greatest geniuses of a generation were heading toward their end, what were the others doing? Was all of Los Angeles really ready to shoot at New York? Did legends like Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, Nas, or Jay-Z truly stand behind their leaders? Or, aware of where this was all heading, did they try to escape the madness? Today, we dig deeper. We uncover who profited from the shadows, who was branded a traitor, and who had the courage to say, enough is enough. We begin with the man who created the sound of the West Coast, Dr. Dre. While Tupac was recording the fiercest diss tracks of his career in 1996, Dre was doing something that seemed unthinkable at the time. He stayed silent. In March 1996, Dr. Dre left Death Row Records, in the middle of the biggest war in hip-hop. The reason was not cowardice, but exhaustion. Violence had become routine. In the studio, guns were seen more often than microphones, and Suge Knight was suffocating creativity through control and fear. Tupac saw it as betrayal. On the song Toss It Up, he directly attacked Dre, accusing him of stepping aside while the soldiers were dying. But Dre saw an ending that Tupac, already deeply pulled into the war, could no longer see. This was no longer a hip-hop conflict. It was a road with no return. Dre's departure was the first quiet sign that the ship was sinking, even as Tupac stood at the peak of his power. Snoop Dogg found himself in the most difficult position of all. While Pac was leading a war, Snoop was fighting for his own life, on trial for murder. That period changed him. Blood was no longer an option. He wanted peace. A stance that would later shock the public had been forming long before. After Tupac's death, Snoop went on New York's Hot 97 radio and publicly said words that were unthinkable at the time. I don't have a problem with Puff or Biggie. I love their music. I love them. To Suge Knight, that was betrayal. To Snoop Dogg, it was an attempt to stay alive. Imagine that pressure. New York hated you because you were the face of the West Coast. But inside your own home, you were viewed as a target because you weren't gangster enough to keep the war going. Snoop later admitted that during that period, he slept with a weapon beside him, not because of the East, but because of people from his own record label. While the two sides were tearing each other apart in public, Ice Cube made the smartest move of all. He became invisible. The man who had been an architect of gangster rap was, at that moment, building a Hollywood empire with the comedy Friday. Some said he had turned his back on the streets. The truth ran much deeper. Cube was too experienced. Shaped by the brutal breakup of NWA and the bitter conflicts with Jerry Heller, to allow himself to become a pawn in a war no one could win. His past had taught him how the industry and street politics could destroy a man, and he had no intention of repeating the same mistake. He understood that the only way to win that game was to refuse to play it. And on the East Coast, something happened that history has almost forgotten. Just 3 days before gunfire would erupt in Las Vegas, Tupac and Nas met at the MTV Awards. No cameras, no bodyguards, no threats. They stepped aside, shook hands, and agreed to ease the tension. On that occasion, Pac admitted to Nas that he actually respected him. He went a step further, promising to remove all insults and disses aimed at Nas from his upcoming album. He planned to return to the studio and revise the lyrics on the Machiavelli album, in an effort to stop unnecessary bloodshed through his rhymes. That piece never got a chance to live. Pac never returned to the studio to change those songs. 3 days later, Las Vegas changed everything, and the insults Pac had promised to pull were forever etched on tape as a reminder of a reconciliation that came just a few days too late. Who truly profited from this tragedy? First on the list, the media. Magazines like The Source and Vibe didn't just report on the war, they helped create it. They sold record-breaking circulations using sensationalist covers that looked like battlefield reports. They turned Pac and Biggie into generals of armies they never chose to lead. Every headline was a bullet. Every cover poured more fuel on the fire. For editors in New York, it meant bonuses and prestige. For kids in the streets, it was a target on their backs. As circulation numbers rose, tensions climbed to the breaking point. The media walked away with millions, and hip-hop was left with two monuments. While Biggie was the target, Jay-Z remained in the shadows. Not because he was plotting tragedy, but because he understood the brutal mathematics of survival. He was Biggie's friend, yet he refused to let the war consume him. While others chose sides in the coastal conflict, he chose position. After March 1997, New York was left without a king. Jay-Z, armed with cold intelligence and the album In My Lifetime, Volume 1, stepped into that vacuum. On the track, The City Is Mine, he effectively issued a proclamation. The mourning was over, the throne was empty, and he held the keys. However, he was not the only one claiming the title. Nas was there, long considered the chosen one since Illmatic. But while Nas stayed loyal to street poetry and lyrical complexity, Jay-Z made a chess move. He understood that power in the new era would not be measured only in bars, but in numbers on a bank account. He filled the void Biggie left behind, transforming himself from a street hustler into a corporate giant. In his world, the ultimate flex was no longer surviving a shootout. It was owning the building where doors had once been slammed in your face. While the war raged on, Puff Daddy was a target in the most expensive suit. He was never a street player. He was a marked man, publicly drawn into the crosshairs by Suge Knight at that infamous 1995 awards show. While others chose weapons, Puffy chose marketing, trying to balance the image of a bad boy with corporate safety. He was there, in the motorcade that night in Los Angeles, watching as his greatest asset and his friend disappeared into the dark. But while Puffy was building a brand, Suge Knight was building fear. He was a bulldozer who believed empires were forged through force, not marketing. Suge didn't just hate Puffy, he hated everything Puffy represented: shine, glamour, and corporate peace. Fate, however, had a different plan. On that fatal night in Las Vegas, Suge didn't lose only Tupac. He lost his shield and his freedom, ending up behind bars as his empire, Death Row, began to collapse from within. While Suge faded into a blur of prison bars and courtrooms, Puffy, after March 1997, was turning grief into a global business model. He ushered in the shiny suit era, transforming hip-hop into a glossy, expensive product accessible to everyone. While the world mourned fallen kings, Puffy was building an empire on their legacy. Tragedy became currency, and Grief, the best-selling hit of the year. Just months before his death, Tupac was working on the project One Nation, aiming to bridge the gap between East and West Coast hip-hop. He invited Boot Camp Click from Brooklyn into his Los Angeles studio, where they slept, ate, and recorded together. Tupac's message was clear. The problem wasn't the people on the streets, but the leaders and conflicts the media exaggerated. There were plans to include Nas, Scarface, and Outkast, though it's unclear if they recorded their parts. The album was never officially completed. Tupac's death halted the project, and the remaining songs exist only as unfinished tracks, a reminder of the hip-hop that could have been united through music rather than conflict. The war between the East and West Coast had no winner. We lost two geniuses, and fear was the only victor. Those who survived learned a harsh lesson. Music is business, and war is for those who have nothing to lose. After 1997, rappers stopped fighting for the streets and started fighting for the Forbes list. Dr. Dre became an untouchable corporate mogul. Snoop Dogg became a global icon. Hip-hop became the most powerful genre on the planet. But the foundations of that empire were paid for with the blood of two young lives we will never stop mourning. The final question: could Pac and Nas have truly united the coast if Vegas hadn't happened? And who in the end was the smartest in all this chaos?